another and final episode of Friday Night Frights. We've been reading from this wonderful, chilly, scary book, Scary Stories 3, More Chill to Your Bones. Created from folklore retold by Alvin, Schwartz, and drawings by Stephen Gammel. These are very popular books from what I understand from you mortals, reading them when you were children. It has been 346 years since I've been a child. Many things I have seen over time, some bad, many good, but I eliminate the bad. Sorry. So, I put on my deathly best, my wonderful coat that my Uncle Count Dracula sent. And I am Count Vampire, your host. So, let's go ahead and get started. This section of this is called What's Going On Here? Story time's going on here. That's what's going on. When bottles begin popping and furniture begins flying all over the house, sounds like a Saturday afternoon to me when Mom was upset. There were many explanations, but none of them were right. Then someone had a scary answer that could involve you. Look at the wonderful artwork by Stephen Gammel. It reads Trouble. The events in this story took place in 1958. I was still a fairly young vampire back then. In a small white house in the suburbs of New York City. I like New York, especially in the 1600s, when it was mostly forest and easier to scare people. The names of the people involved have been changed. Monday, February 3rd. Tom Lombardo and his sister Nancy had just come home from school. Good children. Tom was going on 13 and Nancy was 14. They were talking to their mother in the living room when they heard a loud pop in the kitchen. Somebody was opening the champagne. It sounded like a cork was popped from a bottle of champagne. I told you somebody's opening the champagne. You didn't have to repeat it. But it was nothing like that. The cap on the bottle of starch somehow unscrewed from the bottle and tipped over and spilled. The bottle was all over the house and began popping. bottles of nail polish removers, shampoo, bleach, rubbing alcohol, even a bottle of holy water. Oh, don't say holy water, not around me. Each had a screw cap. Took 2 or 3 turns to open. Now holy water, they always seem to be able to spray that on me. I'll show you the big holes in my back I have from holy water. But each had opened by itself without any human help, and then had fallen over and spilled. "What's going on here?" Mrs. Lombardo asked. Nobody knew. But the popping soon stopped and everything was back to normal. It was just one of those crazy things they decided and put it out of their minds. That's confusing. If I have a bunch of bottles that start opening all by themselves, I wouldn't say, oh, it's just a crazy thing. Let's just put it out of my mind. I'd be doing some investigation. Maybe the invisible man stopped by my house, was trying to yank my chain because I had dropped his pants in the middle of a party. Why I did that, nobody could see anything anyway, is beyond me. Thursday, February 6th, just after Tom and Nancy got home from school, 6 mortar bottles popped their caps. Sounds like they have an alcoholic ghost. The next day, about the same time, another 6 did. 6 bottles and another 6. I am seeing a pattern here. Sunday, November 9th at 11 o'clock in the morning, Tom was in the bathroom brushing his teeth. You gotta try brushing these. His father was standing in the doorway talking to him. All of a sudden, a bottle of medicine began to move across the vanity by itself and fell into the sink. At the same time, the bottle of shampoo moved to the edge of the vanity and crashed into the floor. They watched Spellbound. That's a good movie, watching Spellbound. Have you ever watched Spellbound? Oh, they were spellbound by what was going on. They weren't watching the movie Spellbound. My apologies. "I'd better call the police," Mr. Lombardo said. Yeah, like the police are going to believe that. That afternoon, a patrolman interviewed the family as the bottles popped in the bathroom. The police assigned a detective named Joseph Briggs to the case. Detective Briggs was a practical man. When something moved, he didn't believe that a human or animal moved it, or that it moved because of vibration or the wind or some other natural causes. But did not believe in ghosts. Apparently he hasn't met the undead. When Lombardo said that there was nothing to do with what was going on, he thought that at least one of them was lying. Cops always think everybody's lying. You're innocent until proven guilty. But that's the nature of the game. You have to figure it out. He wanted to examine the house, but when they wanted to talk to some experts to find out what they thought, Thursday, February 11th. The bottle of holy water that had opened the week before opened a second time and spilled. 2 days later, it spilled again. How big is this bottle of holy water? Saturday, February 15th. Tom, Nancy, and a relative were watching TV in the living room when the small porcelain statue rose up from the table, and it flew 6 feet in the air and fell on the rug. You really got some problems going on here. Monday, February 17th. A priest blessed Lombardo's house. to protect it from whatever was causing the trouble. Thursday, February 20th. Tom was doing his homework at the end of the dining room table. The sugar bowl at the other end flew into the hall and crashed. Okay, so the ghost doesn't like sugar. I mean, it has a figure it needs to watch. Detective Biggs saw it happen. Later, a bottle of ink on the table flew into the wall and broke. Ink could think a bottle of ink, the bottle broke and you stink. Spattering in all directions. Who has a bottle of ink anymore? Then another porcelain statue took off. It got bored watching all of this. It traveled 12 feet and smashed into a desk. Was it watching where it was going? That's what I say. February 21st. To get some peace, the Lombardos went to a relative's house for the weekend. While they were there, everything at home was normal. Actually, this is starting to sound like a true story. Saturday, February 23rd, the Lombardos returned. Another sugar bolt took off. It flew into the wall and smashed into smithereens. Later, a heavy bureau in Tom's bedroom toppled over, but no one was in the room when it had happened. This is a very powerful poltergeist. Monday, February 24th. Now Detective Briggs had talked to an engineer and a chemist and a psychiatrist and everybody. Some thought the vibrations of the house was terrible, and that came from underground water that had said or from high frequency radio sounds in the electronic system in the house. It was the cause. So electronics and an underground water flow caused everything to happen. I think that's just a bunch of nonsense. Or downdrafts coming through the chimney. Popping of bottles was blamed on chemicals in the bottles. Really, holy water pops? It's a chemical? It's just blessed water. I should know. I study up on these things so I know how to defend when it comes at me. I just wear a raincoat and I'm okay. The test showed where no vibrations in the house. There was nothing wrong with the electrical system. There was no chemicals in the bottles that could make them pop. What was causing the trouble? None of the experts knew, but one day the Lombardos received dozens of letters and telephone calls from people who thought they did know. Many believed that the house was haunted. What made you think that? Genius. They thought that the poltergeist was on the loose. Well, yeah, that's pretty obvious. I've seen a few in my lifetime. I know a poltergeist when they're on the loose. See, that's all the interesting stuff that was going on in their house. A noisy ghost that is blamed when things move around on their own. No one proved that poltergeist exists, even if you've watched the movie. But people everywhere had told some stories to them from hundreds of years. And they had told was not too different from what had happened to the Lombardos. Detective Briggs did not, of course, believe in poltergeists. He had begun to believe that Tom Lombardo might be the blame. Whatever happened, happened. Tom was usually in the room nearby when he accused Tom of causing trouble and the boy denied it. I don't know what's going on, he said. All I know is that it scares me. Well, yeah, that would scare me too. I've lived in some pretty freaky houses, and yeah, it does get pretty scary when stuff starts flying off the wall. Falling off the wall into your head in the middle of the night. People said that Detective Briggs was a tough cop who could turn in his mother if she would do something wrong. But he believed Tom. Only now he didn't know what to think. Thursday, February 25th, a newspaper reporter came into the house with the family, and afterwards he sat in the living room by himself, hoping something would happen that he could describe in his story. Tom's room was just across the hall where the reporter sat, and the boy had gone to bed. But when he felt his door open, suddenly the globe of the world flew out of the darkened room and smashed into the wall. The reporter dashed into the room and turned on the lights. Tom was sitting in bed, blinking, as if he had been awoken from his sleep. "What was that?" he asked. Wednesday, February 23rd. In the morning, a small plastic statue of the Virgin Mary rose up from the dresser in Mr. and Mrs. Lombardo's room and flew into the mirror. I don't like mirrors either. Why? Why don't vampires like mirrors? It's hard to put on all of this to brush your hair when you can't see. It is so sad. You have to have somebody brush your hair for you and tell you how good you look. And that was right. Tom was doing his homework. A 10-pound record player flew from the table, flew 15 feet, and crashed to the floor. This is a very strong poltergeist. Friday, February 28th, finally the end of the month. Two scientists arrived from Duke University in North Carolina. They were parapsychologists, not a pair of psychologists. They were parapsychologists. They study ghosts, who study experience like the Lombardos were having. Spirit spent several days talking to the family and examining the house and trying to understand what was going on and what was causing it. One night, a bottle of bleach popped its top, and that was all that had happened during the visit. They did not tell the Lombardos about a theory that they had that the poltergeist actually might be involved in such cases. According to this idea, the poltergeist was not the ghost. They were normal teenagers. They had become so troubled by a problem, and their emotions build up into a kind of a vibration. And that is true from studies that people with these special abilities called PK agents or pyrokinesis, they could conjure up ghosts just through their emotions. It's a terrible, terrible thing. So it was taking place in their unconscious minds. They didn't even know what was happening. But the vibration somehow left their bodies and moved whatever it struck. And it happened again and again. And the problem that had been solved until the problem had been solved. My apologies. Scientists had given these strange powers a name. They called it psychokinesis. The ability to move objects with the mental power or mind over matter. No one knew if this really could happen or how to prove it. Yet most reports of poltergeists had involved families with teenage children, and it's normally around the age when this appears, around puberty. and there were 2 children in the Lombardo family. Monday, March 3rd, parapsychologists said that they would prepare a report from what they had learned. The day after day, the trouble returned with a vengeance. By March 4th afternoon, a bowl of flowers flew off the dining room table and smashed into a cupboard. A bottle of bleach jumped from the cupboard box and popped open. A bookcase filled with encyclopedias fell over and wedged itself between the radiator and the wall. The flashlight bulb on the table rose up and hit the wall 12 feet away. Finally, 4 knocks were heard coming from the kitchen when nobody was around the room. Wednesday, March 5th, while Mrs. Lombardo was making breakfast, she heard a loud crash in the living room. The coffee table had turned over by itself. But that was the end of it. After a month of chaos, everything returned to normal. In August, 2 of the parapsychologists gave their report and decided Lombardo had not made up the story, nor did they imagine it. The trouble had been real. But what caused it? They said they had no pranks or tricks were involved, nor was any magic. As the police had done, they also ruled out vibrations and underground water, and other physical causes. The only explanation was not to rule out was the possibility that the teenage poltergeist had been at work moving objects with mental power. They had to have enough evidence to prove it, but it was the only thing they had. It was a poltergeist. They thought it was Tom. If they were right of it, normal Tom, like Tom, had become a poltergeist. And also what happened to other teenagers very might as well happen to you. Boy, that was quite a long story. Goodness. One more story, maybe 2. This is called Strangers. Look at that old boy. It looks like a scared George Lucas. Strangers. A man happened to sit next to another on a train. That bounds to happen. The woman looked out at the man and began reading. The train stopped at 6 stations, but she never looked up once. The man watched her for a while, then asked, "What are you reading?" "It's a ghost story," she replied. "It's very good, very spooky." "Do you believe in ghosts?" he asked. "Yes, I do," she replied. There are ghosts everywhere, and that is so true. You just have to be able to open your eyes and see. "I don't believe in them," he said. "It's just a lot of superstition. In all my years, I've never seen a ghost, not one." "Haven't you?" the woman said, and vanished. Looks like homeboy saw his first ghost. The next one is called The Hog. When Arthur and Anne were in high school, they fell in love. They were both big, fat, and jolly, and seem suited to be another, seem suited to one another. But as sometimes happens, things just don't work out. Like me and my first 1,300 wives. It didn't work out because they all got a stake in the heart. Van Helsing. Arthur moved and married someone else and didn't marry anyone. Not too many years later, she got sick and died. She said it was from a broken heart. Yeah, my wife had a broken heart. It had a stake stuck right through it. The next day, Arthur was driving to a small town not far from where Anne had grown up. Soon he realized that a hog was following him. No matter how fast Arthur moved, the hog stayed right behind. Now that's a pretty fast pig. Each time he looked back, there was the hog. It had begun to irritate him. What irritated me, I would turn around and eat it. Finally, he couldn't stand it no longer. He stopped his car and wrapped the hog on the snout good and hard. That's mean. "Get out of here, you fat, dirty thing," he said. To his astonishment, the hog spoke to him. It was Anne's voice he had heard. If it was her ghost, he thought. She was back as a hog. "I was doing no harm, Arthur," the hog said. "I was just out for a brisk walk, enjoying myself. How could you strike me after we meant, after all, we meant to one another?" Well, how did he know this was his wife? It's just a hog, so he smacked the hog on the nose trying to get it to go away. If it was his wife, well, I'll just leave it at that. With that, she turned and trotted away. That is interesting. None of my wives turned into a hog. They just turned into dust. So there you have it. 3 very interesting stories from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, more to chill your bones, by Alvin Schwartz, and drawings by Stephen Gammel. You could buy all 3 of these books on Amazon. As a very nice set for as low as $5.95. I suggest you check it out. Just type in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark and you will find these books. I've enjoyed this. I've enjoyed you as an audience, and I've enjoyed some of you just a little more. Yes, you know who you are. One last bite and you're mine. So please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Tomorrow night is the night of All Hallows Eve, the Christmas of all that is spooky. So please join me for my final installation. Will it be scarier? Will there be more stories to tell? Will I have a chance to have one of you stop by my house as a special guest, as my treat? Until then, my children, Stay safe. Stay healthy. Wash your hands, because that's just disgusting. Wear your face masks. Excuse me, that happens. That will live forever too. Until tomorrow night. Do not sleep with the lights out. And my friend Joe Motion Videos 82 will be reviewing more G.I. Joes starting next Tuesday. He let me borrow his studio. This is in the dungeon of his studio, and he prefers it down there because he's quite like me. This dungeon of Joe Motion Studios, and home of Count Vampire. Stay safe, my friends. Stay spooky. If your scratches under your bed, do not look. If your door opens with a slight, don't ask who's there, because you just might not want to know. Happy Halloween, my friends. We'll see you later.